Hi everyone, I'm Joe. Today it's time for me to do a book review of Carpe Jugulum, written by Terry Pratchett. This is a fantasy novel first published in 1999. It is the 23rd Discworld novel and the 6th novel set within the Witches character subseries. So, first of all, what is the Discworld itself? It is a large, flat, disc-shaped world, as you would expect from the name, which logically, maybe, rests on the back of 4 very large elephants, which also logically stand on the back of a very large world turtle called Great Achirin, which swims through space as though it was water. Sounds strange, is strange, and the strangeness works and is really funny for the most part, and has created a frankly phenomenal fantasy series of which this is a part. So as far as Carpe Jugulum goes, this is a book which starts off with a family moving into the Ramtops, into Lancra specifically, which sounds quite normal enough. I mean, Lancra in the Ramtops is basically Terry Pratchett's take on Wales in the UK, with basically everything done up to a sort of the next level, everything ramped up and overdone to hilarious effect. However, this family that is moving into the Ramtops isn't entirely normal, because they happen to be a family of vampires, as you do. And they're not just any vampires, they're modern vampires. Modern vampires with their modern views is something that nobody's really seen before, especially not this particular family. And there's a problem, because basically vampires traditionally have always liked the idea of control. I mean, vampirism by itself is a measure of control. So they want to move into Lancre and basically rule. This is problematic for everybody concerned, like King Verence the King, all the people, and especially the witches. The witches are very independently minded. They always know their own minds, they often know other people's minds, and they often act like quite busybodies, but they are genuinely there to help people. They don't like the idea of the vampires moving in and trying to take over. However, these vampires have studied, they've learnt, and they're not the traditional stupid vampires where they live in the big castle with all the objects that can be easily turned into crosses and holy water conveniently around that you can fight the vampire. These are slightly different from that. So the witches are going to have a problem with them, especially as there is a slight problem within the witches themselves, because there is now 4 witches. Because what with the addition of Agnes Nitt, due to the previous 2 books, becoming essentially one of the top full-time witches, and specifically the number 3 is always considered a fairly ideal number for witches as such. I mean, they still argue, but 3 is a good number for them. As a result, Granny Weatherwax, who is considered arguably the most powerful of all the witches that's ever lived in the Ramtops, frankly, she's extremely powerful. She feels as though her time is over, her time is up. She doesn't need to be there anymore, and she can't figure out a way of beating the vampire, so she tries to head off, which is bad news, because frankly she's very, very useful in regards to vampires. And now I don't want to say too much more, but suffice to say, the plot goes from there. There are groups of vampires trying to take control, there are groups of witches trying to not be controlled, there are all the citizens who are being affected to greater and lesser degrees. There is a royal falconer taking part called Hodges Arg. His name, people call him Hodges Arg because that's literally as far as he gets before one of his own birds tries to rip his ear off, or takes a big lump out of his finger. So that's all he is, like Hodges Arg, screaming pain, as you know. Now the characters, as you might guess from what I've just explained about Hodges Arg, are a brilliant part of this book. They're all extremely well written, extremely well developed, and in this, Terry Pratchett takes them on a little bit of a different sort of perspective, because on this, the witches, who you've already seen developed over the course of several books, have now been a little bit changed with circumstances. I mean, Magrat is no longer just a witch anymore. She actually became a queen, although she still doesn't know how to do all the witch-related items. Obviously, there is Agnes, who's now becoming basically a full-time witch, although she's very split-minded about things. She's got a duality of mind, which is useful in some respects, especially with vampires, but I won't say more about that. And then there is Granny Weatherwax and Nanny Og, who are both brilliant characters. They both bounce off each other really well, and both bounce away from each other really well as well, because they both understand each other and also annoy each other immensely, but they ultimately do like each other and genuinely appreciate who and what the other stands for, which is quite useful overall throughout the course of the book. Now, as far as the setting and world building is concerned, that is mostly Lancre in the Rumtop, which is where many of the other witches books have taken place. As I said, Lancre is, say, Pratchett thinking, what are all the stereotypes to do with Wales in the UK? Then thinking, right, how can I make this essentially silly? He's doing it in good taste, with just sarcasm and just good humour and good grace. I'm just thinking, right, there's a stereotype there, I'll twist it and turn it and make it silly. And frankly, that works really well. And also, there's a brief moment in the book where they travel to Otherworld, which is basically the area where the vampires are from, also werewolves and multiple other, sort of races like that, the sort of supernatural races. Basically, Otherworld is essentially sort of Eastern Europe, sort of Russia with Romania and multiple other countries kind of combined into one big sprawling country. And it's a very interesting country. They briefly visit and have an interesting time there. Let's say, I'm not going to say why, but that is really well written. And both these areas, you think about it, you've got essentially the Discworld version of Wales with Discworld, well, sort of Eastern Europe. That creates some interesting contrast and some interesting combinations, which frankly works extremely well. As far as ideas and themes in the book are concerned, the main one is, of course, as you might guess by the fact that vampires are moving in, the witches don't like this, it's about control. Vampirism is about controlling others ultimately. I mean, yes, survival to a degree, but actually it's about control if you think about it. And this presents problems to the witches and makes you think about what is control, because the vampires have a method, let's say, I'm not going to go into too much on that now, but where they want a certain type of control, but they will let people be people, which will be very submissive ones who basically obey everything they say. And it talks about control and the way that sort of a ruling group, or whether that's government or obviously in this group of vampires, wherever it may be, can take over sometimes and overrule current governments as well, because you've already got a ruling elite as such. Not very elite though, very normal in Lancre. The vampires are trying to overwrite it, trying to supplant it, get out of the way and make themselves, the big commanding factor. And it discusses how this could work, what it could mean for both the people that are doing the supplanting, the vampires, what it means for the ones in control, currently the government figures and the witches, and also the general population. It discusses this in an interesting manner, which I think is rather well done, and done in a very subtle manner. And the other thing that is discussed is, as always with the witches, and indeed goes along with the self-control part and the control, is knowing who you are and just being yourself and knowing your own mind. Knowing your own mind comes into play especially well with two characters. Granny Weatherwax, who's frankly one of the few characters who truly understands psychology to a really high level and uses it to a remarkable degree, and also Agnes Nitt, the newer of the witches, who is a interesting character, let's say, with a unique psychology in this particular novel. And the two of them combined, even when they're apart or indeed together doing things, work extremely well, and they discuss basically and bring up what it means to be individual, but what it means to be part of something greater, which I think is really quite important and frankly remarkably well done. And with that said, really, that's pretty much it for this review. So overall, this is a really fun Discworld novel. I wouldn't recommend this for your first Discworld novel because obviously it's sixth in the Witch series, which frankly would be a bit strange at this point to start here. I'll start with an early novel. It's well written, fun, great characters and great world building with some great ideas overall, and amazing humour. You can never forget the humour in Pratchett books. It's in every word and it's brilliant. So a link to the book on Goodreads, as well as all my social media links, can be found in the description box below. And with that said, that is it for this video. So thank you for watching and I'll see you another day. Bye for now.